Dzień dobry, nazywam się Katarzyna Mucha.
Hello, my name is Katarzyna Mucha, and on behalf of the Molecure Company, I would like to welcome you at the meeting which takes place after the publication of the report for mid-2025. The achievements of the company and the business development and the company's plans will be presented by Marcin Szumowski, the chairman of the board and CEO, Piotr Iwanowski, the chief medical officer and member of the board, Zbigniew Zasłona, the Chief Scientific Officer, who is also a member of the board, and Monika Czarnecka, who is the company's finance director. She is debuting in her role at this meeting, and she will tell more about herself later on during the meeting. The meeting has been planned for around 90 minutes. First, the board will go through its presentation, and the second part will be a Q&A session. Please enter your questions in the chat window, and the entire recording will be made available on the company's website in the For Investors tab. Thank you, Kasia, and I'd like to welcome you, ladies and gentlemen, at yet another meeting of our company where we will tell you what was happening in the last half year and the main objectives of the company for the months and years to come. As you probably know, OATD01 has been with us for almost 12 years. This is the most advanced project of the company. This is what we are concentrating our energy and focus and resources on, because we want to check whether this molecule works and whether it can treat and cure patients with pulmonary sarcoidosis. This is a phase 2 clinical development trial. It's in the recruitment phase, and it is characterized by the fact that it can also be used for other conditions, pulmonary conditions and other conditions. And the other program developed by the company is OATD02, and it is a molecule in the phase 1 development stage. As you probably know from the previous meetings, we have achieved the consent to carry out the study, and we are currently escalating aggressively the dose towards MTD. We will talk about it later on in greater details, but the objective for this year and the next year is, first of all, the interim result analysis, so that we can see the top-line results on blinded data. It will guide us towards the right direction and reaching the dose where we reach the pharmacologically active level, which can be further used to develop the molecule in clinical trials. When it comes to our early research program, we have significantly reduced our activity in this area because we have put the priority on clinical studies. We are still continuing our work on the mRNA platform and selected programs, and this is something that Zbyszek will be talking in greater detail about. The pipeline has not changed since the last time we met, with the one exception that 2 programs have been suspended or are inactive. We do not, I-40, we do not have invested resources in this. Currently, this program does not have a priority compared to the other programs. OATD01 and OATD02 will be discussed in detail further on, so I will not take up time here. In the mRNA program, we have made some progress, and this will be discussed by Zbyszek. And now I'm giving the microphone to Piotr. Thank you. The phase 2 clinical trial, the KITE study. Those who follow our progress, you know that this is our flagship program. On this slide, we have collected the basic information about the methodology of the trial. It's the active component versus placebo. We have the PET study as the primary endpoint. Something which might be new to some of you is on the left side the presentation of our interim analysis. We are currently on our way to the first interim analysis. It will show us on a general level whether we are observing a trend showing that our study drug has an advantage over the placebo. This is a double-blind study, so we will not have detailed data at this stage, especially not at the patient level. The company cannot see that data at this stage. The study is still ongoing in the US and in Europe, mostly Western countries of Europe. Nearly all sites are active. There are 3 left which have been planned and which will be activated soon. We also added the Netherlands as a very promising country. We've talked about that on several occasions. We are hopeful about this country. We just had talks with researchers and investigators from those sites. They declared that they will add their patients and to our pool of patients. They will enroll them into the trial. We will be analyzing the first interim data. What poses a challenge for pulmonary sarcoidosis, and we are not the first people who are struggling with this, is finding the right patients who would be willing to participate, because they are the final decision makers whether they want to take part or not. We've already communicated in detail before the series of additional activities we carried out which support enrollment of patients. I have collected them on one slide and updated the data, what our clinical team, in cooperation with our CRO, this is what they do. Most activities are done by us, ourselves. We have implemented a correction into the study protocol, study design, which in a way simplifies the enrollment criteria, and this streamlines the research procedures. We are still carrying out the campaign of visiting centers by our medical team, and additionally a person who has been dedicated for several months to patient enrollment. You can see the list of the countries and the periods where we visited our research sites with the hands-on approach. We brainstormed, we scheduled and planned other activities. We are solving any issues that come up instantly, so that the recruitment is streamlined. When it comes to the active sites, most of the sites are active and they screen patients for possible candidates. There are only a few of the sites which were planned which are not active or insufficiently active. We could possibly close them. And this does happen in clinical trials. But the vast majority of the sites involved are very active. and they're actively searching for patients who would meet the inclusion criteria, especially since our clinical trial is currently the only clinical trial with a new compound globally, which is enrolling patients. Some studies have been concluded, one or two might be launched next year, but currently we are the only ones that have an active trial in this area. So the eyes of the experts globally who are dealing with pulmonary sarcoidosis and this type of diseases, they are focused on us. We are also continuing activities with some of the sites, those who are willing to and have the resources to support their activities with invitations to seminars. A seminar like that was carried out in London recently. It was organized for pulmonologists. It was not only for our researchers, but potentially the experts who could direct their patients to our sites. We are also active in terms of promoting our campaign. We want to make it visible for pulmonologists also outside our research sites. You can see that on the slide. As well, we can see this list of the conferences where we participated to promote our study. And you can also see information about the largest pulmonology or congress in Europe or in the world, actually. So the European Pulmonology Congress, which ended in the Netherlands only yesterday. We were present there as well. At the level of the researchers and patient organization representatives, we were active there. We made sure that our trial was seen, that it is in the awareness of people involved with these areas, so that the researchers and other experts keep it as a high priority, because many sites, and mostly the most renowned ones, are involved in many clinical trials. It's not a secret that clinical trials need to compete against one another for attention. So those actions that we are carrying out are of key importance, and we are doing this activity even more intensely than in the past. We are also carrying out an information campaign for patients. So, advertising this trial directly, we continue our cooperation with the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Reach in the US, who have their members who are pulmonologists. A new thing is also a roundtable online meeting series. We had that for basically all research sites. They exchange experience, particularly those sites which are successful in identifying and enrolling patients into our trial. They share their experiences, they exchange best practices. So that was the KITE study. Now we would also like to tell you that currently we are publishing additional data. These are not strictly clinical data, not from our clinical trial, but this data is based on the clinical material when it comes to the genome basis. Achieved in cooperation with German researchers outside of the KITE study. We carried out such studies which aim at additionally validating our therapeutic target. That is to see whether there is a correlation between the level of the enzyme activity of HIT1 determined, evaluated indirectly based on genome data. One can classify patients based on polymorphism, the genes that code the protein. And the data indicates that in patients who have some polymorphism which reduces the activity of that enzyme, that this translates into increased incidence for sarcoidosis. We are currently publishing this data. This will be published in a few weeks. But the preprint, the unreviewed preprint, has been just released. There is a link on the slide. If someone is very interested, you can read it at the preprint stage. Also, outside of the KITE study, we wanted to share some new interesting information we've noticed in scientific literature over the last few months. They are of significance in terms of our primary endpoint. So the PET trial, so PET-CT, and this study from the clinical pulmonology perspective is a surrogate endpoint. Pulmonologists, clinicians, do not necessarily consider it clinical and meaningful, so which would directly present the clinical state of the patient. And on the right-hand side of the slide, Irish researchers, there's information about the meta-analysis carried out by Irish researchers. They took all the possible studies on pulmonary sarcoidosis available since the beginning of times. They chose 17 trials which were credible and had a good quality. And of those 17 studies, on that basis, they carried out a meta-analysis with the research question of whether this diagnostic method, so PET-CT, correlates with actual clinical symptoms situation of the patient. And the meta-analysis has indicated that the sensitivity and specificity was very high. And it turns out that this outcome, this endpoint, correlates with the classic parameters used by pulmonologists, such as spirometry and functional lung studies. This indirectly secures us in our conviction that choosing PET-CT for our KITE study was good. Without doubt, this data, which was published, will streamline our talks with regulators when we discuss the meaningfulness of our findings and will help us in marketing the drug. We also, on the slide, have information about a very new study, academic study, where researchers had a very big patient sample, so 90 patients, show whether pulmonary sarcoidosis correlates with what's CT in the PET-CT studies. Obviously, we will see this similar data on our study results, but this is the first time we see this research question discussed on actual clinical material in publications. And this shows that the correlation exists and is quite strict. This, again, empowers us and confirms our belief that what we are doing is meaningful and that the outcomes that we obtain, as long as they indicate efficacy, the antigranuloma effect of our drug, this will confirm that we are on the right track.
So let me add a few words about this path. We have already provided you with information during our last meetings, but this market is developing, and there are new players that are entering this new therapeutic field. Madrigal was the first company to register its own drug. In Europe, it hasn't happened so far, so new players are Novo Nordisk that have been able to pick up the third indication for their drug Wegovy. Then we have Roche that has purchased a company that is developing a drug between the second and phase 2 and phase 3. And also we are seeing GSK that has acquired Boston Pharma in terms of their efimosferin asset. So all the transactions that we are showing here are at quite advanced stage. So they either represent the second or the third phase of clinical trials, like, for example, the Wegovy that is now entering the market. But still, the market dynamic is high. We can see some corrections that are flattening the curve, but it is still a very attractive market. However, at this point, we are mainly focusing on sarcoidosis, and we want to demonstrate the proof of concept for OA1, because it will be the game changer, where based on the actual group of patients, we are going to demonstrate that the drug is safe, that it is effective, and it will open the way to other indications as well, such as MASH. In order to start our development in MASH, we need a partner, an additional stream of funding, and at this point we are not yet at the point of being able to start a parallel study in MASH, parallel to sarcoidosis, but we are still open to this scenario, and we are conducting talks. And now our second project, which is the OATD02 clinical oncology, solid tumors. We have the phase 1 clinical study in human. We have a dose escalation study in order to establish the right dose. After suspending the recruitment for several months in order to correct the protocol, we are now entering a phase of more dynamic dose escalation. As you can see, mathematically, we are continuing the process of doubling the dose according to the new scheme. We are continuing the escalation with the doubling from doubling of the previous level. So we've completed the 20 milligram And now, for several weeks, we've been recruiting for the 40 milligram per day, and we have recruited 4 patients. The 4th patient, a female, has been recruited last week, and she is already taking the drug. So that's the most important fact, and the so-called primary endpoints for this study, so the pharmacokinetic and dynamic data from observing the DLT in the first treatment rounds, we are going to, in the first treatment weeks, we are going to have in several weeks. Together with the labs and together with completing the database for the first patients, it is still going to take some time, but still in it we are going to be able to have already this quarter a clear perspective on whether we are stopping out on 40 milligram or whether we continue to escalate, and whether we are within the therapeutic window when we can think of proceeding with the clinical development of this dose as the target dose. If there is a need for further escalation, we already have it foreseen in our protocol, thanks to the amendment. We have both the escalation and the de-escalation scenarios included. If we would also be able to de-escalate to 60 milligrams from the 80 milligrams. But the basic scenario is where we are now, so the 40 milligrams per day. And in the perspective of the coming months, within the next quarter, we would be able to have much more information about it. So much. So this was a short briefing of the second project. So as far as our preclinical programs are concerned, the USP21 is the protein program we are now focusing on, one of the 2 active programs. We are now preparing a compound for the proof of concept in vivo research. We can see a very attractive effect of the USP21 in blocking the transcription factor, the STAT3, which actually translates into a functional blocking of the proliferation and migration of cancer cells, which we want to confirm in vivo at this stage. The USP7, our most advanced lead, is now suspended due to the causes that Marcin provided earlier. It is a program which has so far demonstrated some efficacy in several cancer models. Currently, the most realistic would be the treatment for leukocytic leukemia. We have published a study already, so I encourage you to read it. If we manage to acquire funding, then this program is ready to enter the clinic. When it comes to our mRNA target programs, we had 2 programs with undisclosed targets, and due to the reduction and the actual focus on clinical trials, we have decided to suspend one of them due to the resources availability. The X target is now at the heat to lead stage. It is being developed, and also with the cancer indication. As far as the RNA platform, we have our internal program, but also for the last several years we've been able to develop both in-house and outside a cooperation with based on cooperation with global centers. We've been able to find several hit to lead together with Marcin and with Maurycy, the business development head. We've been presenting this at the bio meetings, but also in direct contact with foundations, with biotechs and academic groups that are interested in rare diseases, and even with some research centers as an idea to develop new research programs. Now let me give the floor to Monika. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Monika Czarnecka. Let me introduce myself. I have the pleasure of taking part in the molecular meetings for the first time. I think that my most relevant experience would be at a decade in a drug development company where I was responsible for the financing of programs. So moving on to our financial results, let me shortly discuss our profit and loss and the balance. In the first half of 25, we've had 10 times increase in revenue compared to the H1 24. We have recognized the grants received, such as the mRNA grant. In terms of costs, you are now seeing some of the results of the optimization measures. The highest item is the early development programs and also business development at the level of 7 million zloty, which is a significant decrease compared to last year. And also we are recognizing the so-called general and administration costs, where we can see a increase year on year, but it is a one-time increase due to recognize reserves due to reorganization that have been communicated by us already, and you can see it on our headcount. The average headcount in the first half was 92, and at the end of September the headcount was reduced to 71 employees. Now, moving on to EBIT, it is of course a negative figure, but it is sort of less negative than it was last year. We are at the amount of minus 9 million. So now looking at financial income, we have some interest on bank deposits. We are trying to invest the cash that we have on our accounts. A slight decrease related to the change in interest rates simply, but still we are able to generate approximately 600,000 zloty. The net loss is 8 million compared to 14 million last year. So we can speak of an improvement of 40% of EBITDA. The EBITDA is 7 million compared to 13 million last year. When it comes to the balance sheet, our fixed assets amount to 79 million, with the largest item being the capitalized development projects. The expenditure on the projects as of 30th of June this year, it was over 16 million. It is an increase compared to the end of last year, when the expenditure was at the level of 53.8. And the other fixed assets is mainly equipment in the company that are, of course, subject to some depreciation, amortization. The current assets, there's a difference we can see between the receivables, and year on year they've increased. We've seen cash in our accounts growing, which is related to the completion of the issue and receiving the cash into the company's accounts. The equity is decreasing, of course, due to the recognized loss. And as far as liabilities are concerned, I think that the division between long-term and short-term is similar to last year, where the decrease in value results from lower costs that we are incurring as a company at present. An important piece of information is the cash level at the end of September, which is 22.3 million zloty, corresponding to the runway running until mid-2026. Speaking of the changes in cash, and the first half of 2025, we started the year with the 18.2 million in our accounts, and the most important improvement was the inflow from the share issue at the level of 30 million, and also we've received a grant of 2.5 million. Of course, there is no company can function without costs, so we are indeed bearing costs of clinical stage and early development and the loss for H1. As you can see, it has affected the financial result, and also in terms of cash, you can see some expenditure on development and clinical work at the point of 8.2 and 2.3 million, and we have some other inflows, mainly from interest. So we're ending June 25 at the level of 32.5 million. Summing up, the information provided at today's presentation, the company is focusing indeed on clinical trials. You can see the expenditure, the red color, the red curve, both the early development, the green early stage curve is falling, whereas the red curve, which is expenditure on clinical stage, is rising, which is related to our increased focus on our most valuable programs, including the OATD-01. Here we can see, you can see a slide that you probably remember from our last meeting, the budget for the year 2025 and 26. We are foreseeing to implementing the strategy, assuming the expenditure for clinical phase programs at the level of 50 million, total expenditure 90 million. The focus on clinical programs resulted in the decrease of expenditure on preclinical and early programs. And how do we want to fund it? Of course, from our own cash reserves that we have in our accounts. We do not, and also the non-dilutive grants, and also revenues from partnering transactions and other activities that Marcin is going to discuss further. So, in terms of grants, the most interesting fresh information is the one on our new service using the AI tools. The information was received in 26th of September. On 26th of September, we applied as a consortium for a grant, and we've received the grant, and the funding that you can see is funding for our company. The grant is based on, of course, on refunding costs incurred, but also we can see, as for the undisclosed target, you can see a grant of 100% cost coverage. So I think this was the most important thing for. And now let me give the floor back to Marcin. Yes, let me comment again. This is the news.
We have submitted an application for the grant 1.5 years ago. We did not get it for procedural reasons. We resubmitted, and this time we got the grant. But currently we are at a different point than when we originally submitted the application. So we are now carefully analyzing what the impact will be on the company's finances in general, and how this grant can be used, using also our own funds and resources of external partners. And from so this decision will be taken this month, but this is good news, which is potentially very beneficial for the company. Different institutions have different rules for financing studies. Two of the grants that we received are financed in 100%, which means it doesn't burden the company's budget at all. But this grant from the NCBR also has an advance payment mechanism, not just reimbursement mechanism. So we are now trying to precisely determine in what scope we may use it, and there will also be a potential announcement of another grant regarding OSP 7. That's the program where, as Zbyszek said, the results are good, promising, but we can't afford to continue it. Here, the financing will also not require our contribution, so we're waiting for that decision, which could enable our continued works on OSP 7. This could allow us to reactivate the program to some degree. And now, moving on to the business development part. Let me move on to the next slide. This slide sums up our actions at the BD level. Our BD activities taken over the last 6 months or 3 quarters even of the year 2025. As you can see, when it comes to the number of the meetings and the level of advancement of the talks and the commercial potential, definitely the most popular or attractive compound in the eyes of investors and partners is OATD01. The talks are advanced. Also, the meetings and talks, which are done under NDAs, are carried out for OATD02 and mRNA platform. But we are talking about a different scale when it comes to the size of the transaction and the structure of the transaction. And they do not fundamentally change the company's financial situation. When it comes to potential contracts, agreements in this regard, what could fundamentally change the company's situation is the OATD01 transaction. This interest is there. There is a certain dynamic to it. Those talks are more and more advanced and concrete. We will be able to tell you more about it during the Q&A session. There are various structures and mechanisms which we are considering. As you might have noticed, after the target capital was announced, the equity component is also taken into account in our talks and the considered transaction mechanism. The reason for the creation of the company in the first place was introducing new therapies for patients into the market. And since the very beginning, our business model was characterized by our will to lead the molecules to a given advancement level and then to move them on. We had the success in our Galapagos transaction in 2000. I won't go into details with the further course of that transaction because you know it very well. But currently, we can see the potential and actual real chances that if the results for sarcoidosis are promising, then I think we will be able to develop this program up to phase 3 and with the potential financing promise also into the market. This is a big thing. As Piotr said before, we are the front runner when it comes to sarcoidosis treatment. There was one compound which was more advanced, but their readings of the studies were negative. To put it bluntly, the interest in the program is on the rise, is increasing, because there are few alternatives. There's just the one, which is not a purely innovative drug. It is definitely not a first-in-class drug. So our position here is strong. We feel confident. And in the opinion of recognized pulmonologists who have been experts in sarcoidosis for years, both in the US and in Europe, who are involved in the trial. Most of them are involved in the trial. So most of that community is very engaged in this trial. And this trial obviously has its challenges. It is difficult. This population of patients is difficult to identify and to enroll, but the trend is going in the right direction. We have more sites, we have more enrolled patients, and we are counting on the fact that in the next quarter we will be able to reach the level of 30 patients in the first quarter of 2026, and in the second quarter we would be able then to perform an analysis to see where we are. So this is definitely the company's focus when it comes to BD. When it comes to early programs, we are thinking out of the box, outside of the grants, who are a natural way of financing such early projects. We are also searching for private capital for specific assets. We have some feedback because as part of our activity, the priority are clinical trials, in particular OETD-01, hence the suspension of OSP 7. Some investors or potential partners with whom we are in talks are also interested in this area. So we are searching wherever we can to make sure that those programs are not left lying idly. The competition is almost not there in terms of OSP 7, and the grant which we're submitting has a long shelf life. The patent has a long shelf life. It just been carried out. So we are not threatening significant competition. In particular with regard to USP 7, but also USP 21. I think I've just summarized everything that's on those slides. In the KITE study, we are heading towards the first pit stop, which is the 30 patient mark. As a side note, let me tell you that in the study by the eTire company, which in the end did not have positive results. So moving from phase 2 to phase 3, they received the FDA approval to continue the trial based only on 37 patient results. In our study design, we have 96 patients, so almost 100. But it's possible that after the interim result analysis, we will be reviewing those projects, and maybe we will be finalizing the study with a smaller patient sample, if the results allow that. So we are checking our options all the time, the options for when we can move on to the next stage of the study. Obviously, after proof of concept has been confirmed, this is the largest milestone to speak of here. We have the will and the ambition to be the first Polish company which reaches phase 3 of an innovative drugs. Because for an innovative drug, biotechnology, no Polish company has achieved that to date. The largest OETD-1, like I said, has the largest probability of a transaction. When it comes to the mRNA platform, we are focusing on 3 different segments with specific proposals, specific offers. So these are research studies, sites dealing with a given area, looking for targets, looking for an option to start a program and then spin out for further investments. There are also foundations which deal with rare diseases, which are also undruggable targets. And we are also looking for mRNA fragments which could allow for treating such patients. And option number 3, this is the commercial area, so other biotechs. In all 3 of those mechanisms, the finances will be different. In the academic area, those amounts will be lower. but the scientific cooperation will be very valuable because we are continue to learn here and expand our knowledge. The whole world is at the learning stage here. But we are doing our best to make sure that it is a profitable activity. The more profitable, the better. I think that would be it when it comes to the summary. When it comes to OECD 01, Piotr has told us everything. We are waiting for the interim results to see how the Arginine results look like, whether we are close or not so close at all. We'll know that this year. So we'd like to thank you for your attention at the presentation stage, and we will be very happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you for this presentation, and we are moving to the Q&A session. Some questions are repeated, so we'll try to combine them or maybe just ask some fragments of them.
We have a question on recruitment in OECD 01. How many patients do we have today, and whether the addition of new centers have already been translated to the new enrollments, and when do you expect the enrollment of first patients in the Netherlands? So let me transfer the question to Piotr. The number of patients is dynamically changing. We are between 20 and 30. Whether the new centers translate into new patients, where, as I said in the beginning, the centers in the Netherlands have just started their activity after obtaining the approvals, after the so-called activation. So, at the moment, among the centers in the Netherlands, we are going to have one that is ready for starting enrollment, and we are going to have some that is still completing the paperwork. So we have not yet acquired a patient in the Netherlands so far, but the researchers are saying that we can expect them very soon. And the recruitment is based on the previous centers. At the moment, we can see a domination of Europe. Europe started later, so and we can see it in numbers. So we have more patients from Europe than from the United States already. Now, looking at the interim analysis questions, do you think that the results of the interim analysis after the drug dosing or placebo dosing to the 15 patients, providing dosing the 15 patients with OTD-01, do you think that a potential partner could be interested in that as the basis for the partnering agreement, or do you treat it as a nice to have but not something critical to partnering? Well, it is a difficult question because it touches on the very methodology of the double-blinded test. You cannot have the cake and eat the cake at the same time in a double-blinded study. You cannot unblind the study and then reblind and continue in the double-blinded regime. So we are going to see a certain trend, but we're not going to see the full results. If the trend is decidedly positive, then, as Marcin mentioned, there may be a decision on completing the trial in the very positive scenario, and then such a scenario would be a yes to your question, but speculating only, if we see a positive trend, but statistically we reach a conclusion that it makes sense to continue the trial without unblinding it and seeing all the results, then the positive trend visible can also be the grounds for a partner to conclude an agreement. We've had several meetings with, including meetings with top 10 companies, and they said they are interested, but show us the data. Some of them said they are going to wait until the final data, but there is a number of companies, including top ones, that if you have any data, show us the trend. So it, of course, does have an impact. So if the positive trend is there, then it will positively impact the partnering options. But if so, as always in this business, it does not it does not make, we're not sure, but we can be hopeful for that. So Piotr responded to the interim analysis question, and what is going to be the communication with the market in this regard? What is the market going to learn from you? For methodological reasons, we are not going to communicate the results because we're not going to see the results ourselves. But if we see a trend, we are going to communicate it. And the fact that we will continue the trial, for example, and that you've seen the futility mentioned on the slide. So you have to take this parameter into account. So the fact of continuing the trial, this fact itself would mean that there is the meaning behind it. So you cannot see the results of a double-blinded study while preserving this regime in the study, but we are going to communicate the trends to communicating it to patients, for example, would undermine the methodology itself. So also, we assumed that the first interim is going to be 50 patients. Well, no news is good news. We cannot publish the data because the data is burdened with a lot of uncertainty due to the double-blinded protocol, but without communicating it to the public, we can still communicate it in our BD talks, and it is already going to be a tool that will be helpful in speeding up the process.
One more question regarding the interim analysis. Is it possible to close the OETD-01 study if the interim results are poor? I think it's a good point if you were to present the possible scenarios. Yes, the scenario is possible. This scenario is also possible from the scientific or bioethical perspective. So if something is futile, if there are no good chances of the curves going the right way, show towards the advantage of the study drug over the comparator, such as placebo in this case, or, and that does happen in the world sometimes, the futility where there is advantage of the comparator compared to the study drug. Science knows such situations. Carrying out a clinical trial, especially a double-blind trial, is a very treacherous, difficult, long time-consuming thing. So we have to observe what the world of science in the given indication in the therapeutic target is observing. So the aforementioned genome studies, which confirm that our heavy machinery that we've launched with this trial is going the right direction. This is a good sign. This somewhere in the background, as the totality of evidence, is of significance for our partnering talks. And one more question. Someone might not have caught that in the presentation. When can the first interim analysis in OETD-01 take place? Second quarter of 2026, beginning of the second quarter. As we count now, this would be beginning of June 2026. Yes, May, June 2026. Assuming that in January we randomize 30 patients, then this period of closing the or ending of the trial by all patients would give us the analysis results at the turn of May and June 2026. Another question regarding OETD-01. What's the plan for continued development of this compound? As finalizing of phase 2 for sarcoidosis and starting finalizing phase 2 and then starting phase 3, or would you like to test it for the indications like MASH or other inflammatory diseases? If so, which diseases? Obviously, we would like to do that, but you need to have the fuel for that. We don't have the fuel for everything. That is why our focus is on sarcoidosis and the proof of concept for OETD-01. And we are adjusting this to the preferences and requirements of the partners with whom the talks are very advanced. Because currently, what is most important to us is for OETD-01 to continue its development so that the value inflection point is passed. If there is an option to do an indication expansion, we will be doing that as far as we can afford to, or our partners can afford to. But as it is right now, this is out of our reach. May I add, we talk about proof of concept for OETD-01. This is a proof of concept for validating ketosis as a target in human. We selected pulmonary sarcoidosis as the indication where we want to prove the proof of concept. The next natural step would be moving on to phase 3, expanding the trial to include patients with more pronounced symptoms. But it all will depend on our partner, because we have results which indicate that apart from sarcoidosis, there is MASH. Piotr was just at the Amsterdam Congress where results were presented which confirm our results in IPF, where we demonstrated the significance of expression of macrophages. So, proof of concept as the therapeutic target is our objective, and the subsequent steps. Well, Should I say what I saw in Amsterdam? Indeed, Korean researchers presented at the Amsterdam Congress for Pulmonology. They presented their ex vivo study carried out in a very advanced methodology. They created human organoids of human pulmonary ovula. So they used human recombined ketonases, and after incubation of one and the other, they observed the fibrosis process of the lungs, which proved that ketonases have a pathogenic effect on the lungs. So if we do have the opportunity to do so, then our compound for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis would make sense. So, moving on, after the 30 patients is good news. If we can move on to phase 3 immediately, that would be even better news. But the primary endpoint reading, which we chose as the PET-CT, for which we chose PET-CT, this correlates with a lot of similar diseases to sarcoidosis. So if we present the interim results in a way that Marcin described, the interest will increase because the market potential for MASH is there. Because the drugs that are available have a different method of action. We can target a different patient subpopulation. We also have an anti-inflammatory action, which is not being addressed by the currently available drugs. Thank you. And now a few questions regarding competition for OATD-01. I will ask 2 questions because I think it might be easier to answer them in a broader context. First question, how significant are the last results of the aTyr company for molecule? And another question regarding competition, I need to find it. Can you discuss in general competition for OATD-01 and at what stage of development is it? The meaning of aTyr results, so phase 3 study, the largest one for sarcoidosis, they were published 2 weeks ago. They demonstrated, at least on the primary endpoint, lack of advantages over placebo. So formally it was a negative result. It has some methodological and business implications for us. Methodological, it indicates that for the primary outcome chosen for that trial, that is reducing doses of orally administered corticosteroids, so the gold standard in pulmonary sarcoidosis. This indicates that this outcome is quite capricious, is quite moody, and if this makes us confident that our selection of the primary endpoint is better, it's more measurable. So again, PET-CT as the outcome. And the business implications are that after this development being discontinued, we became one of the 2 molecules that are most advanced in clinical development with regard to pulmonary sarcoidosis and sarcoidosis altogether. Because for other organ manifestations of sarcoidosis, there are also no breakthroughs. And scientifically, it was a different mechanism of action. So the failure of that company doesn't really apply to our ketonases. So our competition just dropped out of the race. We moved up the ladder on the list of the most advanced companies which are trying to solve the unmet need. Of course, we should use a disclaimer that we don't know for sure whether the competition has dropped out of the race. It's for the regulators to decide. But the company itself, in its communication, says that they need to talk with the regulators and see whether those results can be used in the future. So please don't interpret us as making those judgments too soon. It might be continued. Yes, but from a purely mathematical and business perspective, it seems that this is beneficial because it reduces the competitors, the number of competitors, and the latest estimations which we have based on global data. It's between 1.5, 1.6 billion of value. If our drug works, then this might be good news because there will be more patients that would require our drug. We are targeting a very narrow group of patients, a hand-picked group of patients. But when we move on to phase 3, we will have the entire population of pulmonary sarcoidosis patients that will be possibly eligible for the trial. And it will be a big challenge to find the right endpoint, because this seems to be of key importance for trials like these.
Bardzo dziękuję.
Thank you so much.
Pytanie teraz o granty.
Now, a question about the grants.
Dwa pytania,
Two questions that Monica has partially already responded to in its presentation. So there is a question on how the situation with grants looks like, what are the applications submitted, and what applications are you planning to submit by the end of this year, and whether you are planning to submit more applications for OETD01. Okay, so let me respond with respect to grants. The information is available on the slide. If there are any grants available where our projects could be taken into account, we are of course going to apply. So I know it's a general answer, but I think that I'm afraid I cannot provide more details at this moment. The biggest challenge in biotechnology, not only for our company, but all the biotech companies that have entered clinical trials phase, is a problem with the definition of commercialization and the possibility of the actual implementation, deployment, where this definition was quite unfavorable for biotech companies because they are not probably going to sell the drug themselves and distribute the drug themselves. So it was very difficult for biotech companies to obtain funding for clinical development. We are a part of an association that is basically asking the government to reconsider the criteria. For the moment, we are not seeing any competition, any call that would be able to fund, for example, our kite study. So we are looking everywhere, and the US has sort of been now unavailable, so to say, because of the budgetary issues that you probably have heard about. The NIH is really decimated in terms of staff and resources, so the US destination is no longer an option at the moment. We are hoping for new programs, and we are not really seeing calls where we could approach with the Kite One study, apart from the European part, where we are applying for the accelerators. We could perhaps enter with MASH, but it would not be possible to enter with an ongoing study. It's rather a new study that could be considered by those programs. So we're counting more on the partners and on different instruments we're now discussing to be able to complete the study, to show the results, and then many options can be on the table.
Jasne, dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you.
Pytanie jeszcze jedno o grant.
One more question about grants, about the mRNA grant. How many more grants are available to be used in this program? Let me just remind you that the mRNA grant is actually settled based on the cost refund. So first we have to incur the cost, and then we can apply for a refund to the intermediate body, and at the moment it is approximately 88% of this grant. So while we're at it, another question to the mRNA platform: what is your plan for the development of this platform? An earlier partial commercialization or a big agreement later on? What about your competition in the mRNA platform area?
No, zacznij, a ja dokończę o konkurentach.
Please start and I will end with the competition part.
Weszliśmy
So,
w tą dziedzinę
since we
biznesową,
entered
naukową, czyli
this
celowanie
business scientific
bezpośrednio
field,
w
so
mRNA,
targeting mRNA directly,
uzyskaliśmy kompetencje
we have
na
acquired
pierwszych etapach rozwoju
competences for the
leków i to jest to,
first
co też w
stages
sumie
of
mogę
drug
powtórzyć, co
development.
było już omówione na slajdzie,
And
czyli
I can only reiterate
wychodzimy
what
z usługą,
was
aby
shown
rozwijać
on the slide, that we are
programy niekoniecznie
offering a
wewnętrznie, ale
service
na zewnątrz. To jest to, co
that
obecnie
allows to
robimy,
develop programs,
aby pokazać te
not only in-house,
kompetencje
but also
i te usługi, tak też w tym
outside.
grancie sformułowany.
And this grant is actually
Jeśli chodzi o
worded
nasze
in such
wewnętrzne programy,
in this manner.
rozwijają się
And
w
as far as our
obecnie rozwija się
internal
jeden
programs,
i
we are
były już
now
rozmowy,
developing
konkretne,
one of
w
them.
kontekście tego programu.
We've held talks
trzy pytania,
on this program.
na które nie mieliśmy jeszcze
We
odpowiedzi,
had
były nam
three questions.
zadane. Na dwa z tych
We are
pytań
approached with three
uzyskaliśmy już
questions.
odpowiedź. Czekamy
Two
na
questions
trzecią, ostatnią
we've
i
been
wtedy
able to answer, and
wrócimy
we are
do
waiting
partnera, z
for
którym
to be
rozmawialiśmy.
able to provide a
To
response to
wtedy
the
nie była to
third
usługa,
question,
tylko
and then we
konkretny
were
program,
going
który
to
obecnie
get back to our
rozwijamy.
partner, and then we'll be able to perhaps split the program. Well, as to the competition, the biotech has seen some sinusoidal trends. I think that we're now getting out of some of the backward trend. We are seeing some more interest. The United States situation have not been let's say,
po
normal
takim, można
in
powiedzieć,
typical for this
2-3-letnim
country,
hypie,
for
gdzie
this
tych
market.
transakcji było dużo i
After
one
the
były
2-3 year
wartościowo bardzo
hype, where
duże,
there was many
większość z nich nie
high value
doprowadziła
transactions,
do
the
dalszego
majority
rozwoju
of
tych cząsteczek
those
w
transactions have
kierunku
not
rynku.
brought
Więc tutaj
any
też apetyt
molecules to the
inwestorów
market,
jest
so the investors' appetite
odrobinę
has sort of
odrobinę albo nawet więcej
weakened,
ostudzony. Jedyną firmą, która
and
tak jakby dalej
the only
aktywnie
company that is
działa
actively
na rynku
operating
biotechnologicznym, to
in
jest
the
chyba
biotech
Skyhawk,
market is, I
który
think,
był pierwszy w
Skyhawk,
ogóle
that was the
rzeczywiście. On
first
trochę technologicznie jest inny od tego, co my robimy, bo
it is technologically a
Skyhawk
bit
to jest
different from
splicing,
our
a
work
my
because it is
staramy
splicing,
się
and we
bezpośrednio
are
oddziaływać
trying to
na te
impact
dojrzałe mRNA i
the
konkretne struktury.
mature mRNA structures,
Natomiast
but
no, zainteresowanie
the-
nadal jest.
there is
Wydaje
still
mi się, że
interest.
globalnie
And I
trochę
think that
wyniki
globally
w różnych
the
podejściach,
results in different approaches
nie dorównały oczekiwaniom.
have not
Natomiast
been
no,
up to
wydaje
the
mi się, że to
expectations
ta
of
sinusoida będzie
the
dalej
market,
działać,
but
to
I
znaczy,
think
jak
the
komuś się uda,
sinusoid
ktoś pokaże
its
dobre
trend
wyniki,
is
no to
going
się
to
znowu
continue
w tej chwili
once someone
jest,
shows good results. It
jest,
will sort
no,
of
znacznie mniej aktywności, im
reverse
mniej firm,
the trend, and
im mniej
there
transakcji
is
niż
less and
było
less
2-3 lata
companies,
temu.
less and less transactions that we're observing compared to, for example,
Dziękuję.
2-3 years ago.
Teraz pytanie o sprawy
And now a question
kapitałowo-finansowe.
on equity
Jaki
and
jest
finance.
pożądany lub prawdopodobny
What
profil
is
inwestora mogącego objąć
Your
kapitał w
desirable
spółce,
profile of an
a
investor for your
którego to
company?
inwestora zarząd miał na
That
myśli w
what
projektach
and
uchwał
what
na
type of
walne
investor did you
Czy chodzi
mean
o
in
inwestora
your
finansowego,
resolutions
zagranicznego, czy
at the
merytorycznego,
management board?
branżowego?
Do you mean a financial investor or a sort of
To ja
scientific
odpowiem ogólnie
partner?
trochę, bo znaczy, jeżeli chodzi o idealnego
the
partnera, to
Profile
muszę
of an
powiedzieć,
ideal
że dla nas
investor for us
w tym
would be,
momencie idealnym
at the moment,
partnerem, niezależnie od
regardless
specyficznej
of
struktury
the
transakcji,
specificity
byłby
of
partner
the
branżowy,
of
który jest
transaction, is
zainteresowany
a partner
obszarem
active in the
terapeutycznym
field,
i
the
wdrożeniem
sector,
go na rynek
interested
globalny.
in the therapeutic
Jeśli
in
chodzi o
therapy,
strukturę transakcji,
in
no
getting the
to
drug to the market, and
kapitał docelowy
the
daje nam możliwość tego, żeby w którymś
the target
momencie czy na którymś
equity
etapie transakcji element
makes it
equity był wykorzystany
possible
jako źródło
to
finansowania
to
dalszego
use the
rozwoju
equity
cząsteczek.
to
No i były takie
actually
przykłady,
continue to fund the
na
development
pewno
of the
Państwo je znacie,
molecule.
jakby się
There's
cofnąć
been
do
examples.
spółki starszej
If
od nas
we,
trochę, jeśli chodzi
for example,
o
take the
lata istnienia, czyli
take this
Riview, no to
example,
też
the
była
Riview,
umowa podpisana z
we saw an
tym
agreement
elementem
signed
kapitałowym,
with the
więc
equity element.
chcemy mieć
So
wszystkie
we
możliwości
want to
otwarte
have
i
keep
wybrać tą
all our
najlepszą
options
opcję,
open and to
która
select
z dużym
the best
prawdopodobieństwem
one,
umożliwia
the
rozwój
one that would
cząsteczki
allow us to
do
develop the
kolejnych etapów
molecule
rozwoju, bo mówimy,
until and
zakładam,
up
że
to
teraz pytanie
the
dotyczy
subsequent
bardziej
stages of
Riview.
development. I mean here the OATD01.
Dziękuję bardzo. Pytanie jeszcze jedno
Thank you.
precyzujące
Now,
kwestię grantów.
another question
Jaka jest kwota
related to
ostatnio
grants.
ogłoszonej
What
rekomendacji
is
do dofinansowania
the
SFENT
amount
przypadająca na samą
for
spółkę?
the
Bo na slajdzie dzisiejszym
European
pojawiła się ta
FANG
kwota 27 milionów.
program that is
Natomiast
now
wcześniej kwota,
considered
która była podawana, to
the
36,1.
we've seen the two
Więc pewnie
amounts,
warto
27 million and
doprecyzować kwestię tego
36 million. So can you
Jasne, to ja już odpowiadam. Tak jak,
tell us something
tak
about the
jak,
consortium
dzisiaj
and the
dokładnie na
amounts?
slajdzie ta kwota
Yes, as you could
27
see on the
milionów, jak
slide, the
Państwo widzieli, była
27
oznaczona
million
gwiazdką. 27
was
milionów to jest ta
marked
kwota
with
przypadająca.
arrows
Dla
with
spółki
asterisk.
wspomniane
So
36 milionów jest kwotą
the
realizowaną w konsorcjum.
this was earmarked
Także
for our
tutaj
company, and
różnica,
36 million is for the entire
na
consortium.
partnera w konsorcjum
So,
jest to
and
9 milionów.
the difference, the 9
Tak, to
million,
jest
is for our
Instytut
partner
Chemii
in
Organicznej.
the consortium, which is the
Jednostka
Institute of Organic Chemistry,
Dziękuję bardzo.
the
Teraz
public
kolejne pytanie już
entity.
dotyczące
All right. Another
Czy
question
rozważacie sprzedaż
about
samego
partnering in
patentu
general.
w jakimś wskazaniu?
Are you considering to sell the patent for an indication, the patent itself?
Każda transakcja,
Well,
która dotyczy
every transaction
cząsteczki czy
that
innej
would
że tak powiem,
concern
formy
a molecule or
terapeutycznej,
another therapeutic
no,
form,
patent jest nieodzownym
well, the
elementem
patent
tego.
is an indispensable element
Jeżeli mówimy,
of such a transaction.
być może taki przykład YKL-40, to
For example, the YKL-40, we could sell the patent without the actual molecule, but in the more advanced projects, you usually see one with the other. So, ensuring subsequent development in the agreement is a key element. You do not sell the patent for somebody to have the patent. You want them to make something out of it. If anyone is interested in buying a patent, then please, you can send us an email. I think that we could maybe consider, but seriously, I think that we think about the entire package, so and not one patent, but 3 patents, for example.
Dziękuję bardzo. Pytania podobne mamy dwa o
There are two similar questions regarding the date for the possible agreement on commercialization. Do you uphold the view that this might happen before the end of 2025? If so, what is more likely, the contract on OATD01 or the mRNA platform? Well, again, we'd have to just be maybe making uncertain guesses, because not there are factors which are not dependent on us. This is possible still this year. And what was the other part? Which is more likely? Is it more likely for ORTD01 or the mRNA platform? Well, based on all the measurable factors, the ones about which we can directly talk, OATD01 is the more likely candidate for such a transaction. Let me add that there's also OATD02 in play. With the 40 milligram dose, the results the readings will be there this year probably. If the PD marker is increased statistically, as we assumed, and there will be no toxicity, we will see it as the opening of a therapeutic window. And for OATD02, there are concrete chances that something good will happen. Yes, here we also have some active CDAs, and there is interest also in this project. Obviously, this project is at an earlier development stage, so we won't have specific efficacy results, unlike with OATD01. But yes, indeed, this is also a program where we are actively taking actions. Coming to OATD02, so the clinical project, are you observing any signs of efficacy in OATD02 patients? Maybe it's good if you reminded our listeners to how this design looks like. Here, the main objective of this trial is assessing the safety and pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. So, what are the effects on the human body? But because it is a trial carried out in patients who are actually diagnosed with a specific disease, it is tempting to maybe evaluate the possible efficacy. However, at this stage of development, This is a secondary endpoint. So if if measurable efficacy was to be observed, this is something definitely desirable. Everyone would want that, mostly the patients. But science indicates that this is rare, so we do not focus on efficacy. We go step by step in this development process. Of course, we do observe and we do measure. When it comes to specific results, the trial is still ongoing. It is not a practice that is adopted globally, that we inform prematurely about possible efficacy results, and we try to observe this rule. One more question regarding OECD02. Assuming this trial ends in the first half of 2026, what's the future? Will you be continuing with phase 2? And if so, in which indication? Let me just remind our listeners that as of today, we have the maximum tolerated dose. That is one of the main objectives, and preparing us for the next stage, which is the efficacy study. Currently, we have 4 types of tumors, of cancers, and in the next stage, our preclinical data strongly suggest that it would be a combination with antibodies like PD-L1 and selecting one specific type of cancer. It's too early to tell which of them, which cancer that would be, which cancer we would target with a specific dose to prove efficacy of the compound. Two more questions, as we are slowly running out of time. In the OSP7 project, there was supposed to be a candidate for clinical development, and then optimization works were carried out. In the end, the project is being suspended, but the company decided to develop OSP21. What is the rationale for this decision? Were the challenges met during the works on OSP7? Can these challenges apply also to OSP21? If so, why? This was mentioned in the presentation, but maybe you should talk about it. For financial years, the cost of the studies, the costs for the OSP21 studies are lower than for OSP7. We cannot currently afford it financially. As a rule, in preclinical study, we have this rule, not like everyone gets some, and even the weakest programs get support. But the most promising projects are allocated the largest funds. OSP7 would cost our company too much, and we cannot simply afford to do that for financial reasons. OSP21 can be developed currently at lower costs. We can increase the value of this program at a lower cost, and that is the reason why OSP21 is being continued, why OSP7 was suspended. There is this grant submission which we submitted to ABM, and we are waiting for the results. As Marcin and Monika said, we are expecting it soon. This will help us take the decision of whether we can continue. At the same time, there is no competition. So the fact that OSP7 is waiting as suspended It's not the best situation, but it is quite secure, quite a secure situation. We do have patent protection. If we have the option to get direct funding for this program, we will continue it. It's not like USP 7 was withheld, was suspended for scientific reasons. It is a purely managerial and financial decision.
Tak, no niestety tutaj
Unfortunately,
mamy stosowanie to takie może mało biotechnologiczne podejście, ale
this might
tak
not be a
krawiec
very
kleje się materii staje
biotechnological
niestety
approach,
wszystko
but
nam nie wystarczy.
we do
Bardzo
not
byśmy
have
chcieli,
enough
gdybyśmy trochę,
resources to cover
dłuższy
all
runway
our
i
ambitions.
i
It's a longer
większe
runway.
finansowanie mieli.
If we had a longer runway, if we had greater financing, we'd probably be able to afford to take different decisions. But currently we are very focused on reaching those game changer events, which will directly impact OETD-01 probably, and continued development of this molecule. And indirectly, they will also impact other areas of the company's activity, including the earlier programs, in particular, or maybe independently, regardless of whether it's a license transaction or a transaction with an equity component. There will be additional funds flowing into the company, and then, if there are no scientific arguments against, and market-wise, the areas are attractive and can be monetized, in such situations we will be considering continued development of the most promising molecules which have the largest potential. And now, the last question. When do you think the trend for biotech companies will change and the investors' lack of willingness to invest in them? The interest rates should help, but especially with regard to changes in the US. Will this be enough? I am afraid to comment what is happening in the US because it's very difficult to foresee. I think it's easier to forecast the weather than what will be happening in America. But we are observing the first signals of the trend reversing. I think it has different effects on different geographical areas. With our situation, investors' hesitancy to invest in biotech projects is in a way due to the lack of larger breakthroughs which had been observed previously. So this will probably be the one aspect. And since we are talking about clinical trials, it might be easier to get private capital, but still there's insufficient funds. So we would need instruments that would support financing, because in the last 2 or 3 years they were missing, and that certainly doesn't help, because it is this mechanism which, if there are no investment mechanisms, the investors are the burden is more on the investors, and they are more hesitant on whether to invest. So mechanisms which would be in place would help. We hope that this will be possible maybe in the international market. Maybe this trend will be started internationally, and maybe with good results, we'll be able to continue it. So we focus what we have impact on and what we focus on is OECD 01. Sarcoidosis is an unmet medical need. There are no drugs which address it. We are in the top 2 companies which try to solve this unmet medical need. There's also potential for another indication, so MASH. So what we do have impact on is getting the patients and keeping our fingers crossed that the results will be positive, and then investors will come. So 2 times letter P, patients and partners. And now, last question, and we've reached the end of our, that was the last question, because we've reached the scheduled time for our presentation. We'd like to thank the board for their presentation, for answering the listeners' questions. Thank you for posing those questions. The recording will be posted on the company's YouTube channel within a few days, and the presentation will be available on the company's website, on the For Investors tab, and as always, we invite you to contact the Investor Relations Department. Thank you so much for your attention.